year the Gold Coast Seminar. We are very honored and delighted to have invited Mr. Olio Pascal as our keynote speaker. And now, may I invite our JCDC Director, Mr. Alvin Yip, to introduce them. Thank you.
Sure, I'm a little bit unfamiliar with the rundown. Now, perhaps before the speakers, I'd like to speak a little bit about Gold Coast Seminar. Well, it's, of course, one of the highlights of the 10-day festival, the Social Innovation Festival. And the reason behind is really that we believe, at least to a certain extent, we should understand the development of social innovation and entrepreneurship of Hong Kong through comparing Hong Kong with other cities. That's one way to learn. So that's why we try to organize every year to have a partnership with another city. And we align, or kind of we tag along, another major design event in Hong Kong called the Business of Design Week. And every year they have a partner country or partner cities. And this year it is with Barcelona. So we focus in Barcelona and try to look for the best person to join us to tell us about what's going on, of course, in this field in Barcelona, and whether, of course, in the long run, we hope that apart from learning, there could be a lot of collaboration. But first of all, we have to understand each other. So that's the reason we organize the Gold Coast Seminar every year, and we hope that this will continue. Now, the speakers, of course, the keynote today, as the MC introduced, Oreo. He is of course, there's much detailed bio with you already. So we understand him through many links. Of course, also the Dean of the Design School, Case de Born, because Oreo also spent some time in Delft some years ago. But in short, he himself is both an entrepreneur, and I understand you're also working for the university now, being the director of the IQS Entrepreneurship Center called Factory, is it? Tech Factory. So you're directing that institute. So I believe it's probably a little bit similar to what I'm doing. So connecting traditional institutions, university, to the community and the industry. So I'm really looking forward to your talk. And of course, IQS, some of you might know, is very well known in the Catalonia, Barcelona area. Now, also I would like to thank in advance our two good friends, Kim and Ming. Ming being the moderator today. We have known each other for a few years now. Of course, he has much more experience. I joined the field a lot later in the field of social innovation, but he is certainly an expert in, from my understanding, in investing, coaching, and measuring of social innovation, and not only in Hong Kong, but in Asia. So his entity is called the Asia Community Ventures, and of course he's the CEO of it. And another good friend, Kim Sok-Out, a very senior government civil servant, and he's the current head of the government efficiency unit. And some of you, if you're not familiar with this huge government structure, this is a very special, not only important, but special unit under the chief secretary of the government of Hong Kong. So they have they're kind of a little bit like the powerhouse for, I believe, a lot of the ideas behind the government, especially its efficiency. But there's also one special task in the last 2 years now, or 3 years, that, as you might have heard, that there's this 500 million social innovation and entrepreneurship development fund. Usually it's simply called SIE fund. An efficiency unit is also the secretariat and, say, the administrative arm of that money that would be very important for the future development of this particular field of social innovation. And that's also the reason why Kim is here with us today, and he'll be the respondent for today. Now, I should stop here. I'm not the speaker, so please, I give it back.
Thank you so much, Alvin. Now, it's time for Mr. Ming Wong to set the stage, and let me welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And it's great to see so many of us here today. And I think what I wanted to do with the seminar today is for each of you here to think about, as Oriol is describing the Barcelona experience, to think about how it relates to your own experience. I think we have a relatively intimate group here this morning, and there are mics in front of everybody. So in terms of the rundown, his remarks will be approximately 40 minutes. And then Kim will respond, and as well as share some of his perspectives from the Hong Kong government's side. We also have with us today a number of leaders in the space, and including representatives from the Jockey Club and Polly Yu as well. And we will also obviously hope that they will also be willing to share some of their perspectives. But more importantly, I want each or every one of you here to really think about how the Barcelona experience might relate to your very own, right? Think about what you might agree with, as well as what you disagree with, what resonates with you, what are the problems that you see that are in common between the two cities. You may or may not know that Barcelona, although it is part of Spain, has this very unique culture. It's not that different from Hong Kong. We are part of China, and yet we also have our very own unique culture in a very challenging time where we are struggling with collectively, how do we become part of the greater entity while retaining our own identity, right? This is something that Oriol is very familiar with, and I think he will share some of that as well. So without further ado, Oriol, please.
Thank you very much. Actually, first of all, I would like to thank GCDC and Polly Yu for inviting me here today, and also the entire organizing team for such an amazing work. I understand that this 10-day festival, it's running very, very successfully, so thank you very much for inviting me here. Let's see how this works. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so today we're going to talk about social innovation and entrepreneurship in Barcelona. And as King was mentioning, will be wonderful when we can see parallelisms or what we can learn from each other. I also want to learn from you. This shouldn't be unidirectional. I think it will be wonderful when we have a conversation later on. As an introduction, my name is Oriol Pascual, and I've been working for the last 17 years or so as business developer, always in the field of sustainability, so both social and environmental. Started my career at Philips Corporate Sustainability Offices in the Netherlands, developing an internal environmental audit system. But later on, in 2007, I was asked to develop and to set up a business incubator on clean technologies in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Since then, I've always been working with entrepreneurs, either supporting them directly, or I've been helping existing incubation programs develop new processes. Or either I set up programs from scratch, as I'm doing now, where I work at IQS, which is also a technical university in Barcelona with 110 years of history. And we just set up the Center for Entrepreneurship, where we are supporting scientists and engineers to develop technologies and bring them to the market in the form of new ventures. But I think that you know me now, and I would like to know you. I would like to know who's at the other side. So I wonder, how many of you here are students? Okay, we have few students. And how many people, how many entrepreneurs? Yes, wonderful. People coming from the hockey club? Okay. Teachers? Okay, entrepreneur and teacher, wow. That's a complete profile. Who I'm missing? Who I'm missing? Because not everyone is raise the hand. What will identify you, the ones that didn't raise the hand? Practitioners? Or people from government? Yeah, one, we know. Okay. Say it again?
Are professionals interested in the field?
Oh, exactly, exactly. Professionals interested in social innovation, how many? Okay, consultants maybe? Yeah? Okay, okay. I think we are a very mixed group, very eclectic. It's good that it works both ways. That is not only that you get to know me, but I get to know who's at the other side. So today's agenda has three main points. First, we start by setting up the context. I will talk a little bit about the context in Spain and Catalonia and Barcelona, and as Kim mentioned, maybe some of the peculiarities we face there, and also some of the social issues we are facing. The second point will be, I will argue that decentralized models are taking over. There are new ways to deal with issues, and we see this happening in business, but that's also happening in social innovation. Especially we talk about decentralized models in civil society, governance, and entrepreneurship. And finally, I'll take an iceberg view of the social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Barcelona. We'll see who are the actors, what works, and what needs to be done to further mature that field. So let's start with the context. And I come from this corner of Europe that is Spain. In Spain, we have a parliamentary monarchy for the last 40 years. Before that, we had a dictatorship. 46 million inhabitants, almost 47 million inhabitants. And on average, a person in Spain earns 260,000 Hong Kong dollars a year. That can start giving you a picture of how things look there. More specifically, I come from the east part of Spain, which is Catalonia. We have our own language there, and we have our own government there. Roughly 7 million people, of which in Barcelona there are over 5 million people. And this is a very innovative, inventive country, I will say. 1% of the world's scientific output is produced in Catalonia. And it's quite remarkably for such a small population. What is more difficult is to turn this invention into innovation. Not many of this scientific output ends in the market in the form of companies or products in the market. That's a challenge that we are working on today. We are very good at producing know-how. We need to get better to bring this know-how into products and services in the market. And well, specifically I come from Barcelona. How many of you have been in Barcelona? Yeah, wow, quite few. So that's not new for you. That's fantastic. Barcelona, it's a city that has many qualities. It has mild weather almost all year round. Great connections to international hubs worldwide, good work and professional opportunities. And actually, it's been selected several times in a row as a city with best quality of life in Europe. And more, we see foreign people coming over to work professionally in Barcelona and to set up there because of that. In the last years, the city has chosen two areas in which it wants to be known for, or two new industries, let's say. One is the whole smart city concept. In fact, we host the most important smart city congress in the world. And Barcelona itself, it's embedding smart city technologies and approaches to the city, and it's becoming vertical on how the city is being run. The second bet, or economic bet, is on the mobile economy. And it's been already for the past 6 years the Mobile World Capital. And we host the Mobile World Congress, and there is a full economic program around being leaders in mobile. Not so much in hardware, but everything around that. But those are decisions that be made top down. But lots of things are happening also bottom up. And especially what we see is that people, it's engaging with each other in the so-called sharing economy. People is sharing resources. People is sharing skills and knowledge. And they are sharing the cars, they are sharing the apartments, they are sharing tools, they are teaching each other. And around this idea of sharing, new business opportunities are emerging, and new ways of working and new platforms have been developed. But although it's wonderful to live in Barcelona and everything is beautiful and we have terraces and have a good time, we also have quite some social issues. Many things are happening under the surface. And I would like to point three main issues that worry politicians and worry civil society and people alike. The first one is unemployment. We have a huge unemployment rate. This is not just Barcelona, that's Spain. We have 23% of the active population today is unemployed. This is huge. It's unprecedented. This came after the 2008 crisis. Still, we had very large unemployment rates of some 13, 14%. But now it's way too much, especially among the young people. 50% of young people under 25-year-old are unemployed. This is a big, big issue. And we could have a full seminar only about that, on the reasons of why it's like that. But a lot has to do with the education system. A lot has to do with what happened with the economic boom that I will talk later on. But we had this construction bubble. Many young people was working in construction, earning lots of money, and quitting studies, and then the entire system collapsed. But that will be for another seminar. The second problem, or social issue, is the aging of population. That's not unique for Spain. That happens globally, worldwide. 17% of the population today in Spain is over 65-year-old, and we expect to reach 30% by 2050. If we mix these two issues here, we see a problem that's going to come in the following years, which is going to be a pension crisis. We are not going to have enough productive people that will be sufficient to pay for the pensions of all these elderly people. So if we will be proactive, we should start designing how we deal with that, because that's a clock that is ticking and the bomb is going to explode at any given time. And the third social issue is housing. And this is maybe more unique of Spain. And when I mean housing is access to housing and the whole problem with evictions. And I'll do a little bit of recent history here. So in mid-90s, the law in Spain for land use changed. In order to promote construction and promote the economy. And it worked very well. Lots of construction companies bought land, and people was buying houses like crazy. And many people started buying and selling houses. And buying and selling houses. And prices started to go up and up. So we went into a spiral of speculation. And prices were getting very expensive, and banks were giving loans to everyone. It was so easy to get a loan. And people was getting loan for 120% of the value of the house, 130% the value of the house. So you could buy the house and everything that goes on it. Almost you were getting a loan with your cereals in the morning. It was very easy to get a loan. So many people got these massive loans. They bought new houses in a time where everything was good. But in 2008, the economic crisis hit. And suddenly, many, many families and many people could not afford to pay those loans. And banks start claiming either my money back or I want the house because I own the house. And we got into this spiral of evictions. We got into this spiral of banks asking people to get out of the house is mine. If you cannot pay the loan, I keep the house. And this has been massive. This is a social disaster because hundreds and thousands of families were kicked out of the house. And this is not like in the US. In the US, you cannot pay a loan. You give the keys back to the bank, and you're debt-free. In Spain, the bank gets the house, and you still owe the money to the bank, which is horrible. So since 2008, we had over 171,000 evictions. This is 171,000 families that are asked to leave the house because the house belongs to the bank, and that they had to go to live with relatives or find other solutions, or find like a cheap rent somewhere else, something they could afford. This creates lots of social stress. And we'll talk later on about solutions for that. But I wanted to bring this because I think it's very unique of the case, of the crisis and the case in Spain. The question is, so you have all these issues, how are you dealing with them? How are you solving these issues in Spain or in Barcelona? And we have the traditional government approach. We have governmental programs. We have official institutions. And this is all well and fine, but maybe not as efficient as it could be, maybe not as fast and as reactive as it could be. So people is organizing themselves. People is finding for solutions on their own. And they are doing it on a distributed manner. People start to connect with each other, and they self-organize, they share resources, they do it in an open and transparent way, and they build platforms that are highly scalable. And what I would like to argue today in this presentation is that this has big implications in 3 areas: civil society, governance, and entrepreneurship. So for the upcoming minutes, we're going to talk about how distributed models, in the case of Barcelona, are working or having an impact in civil society, governance, and entrepreneurship. And we start with civil society. As Kim mentioned before, okay, well, please let me know if I'm late, as I'm behind. As Kim mentioned before, Catalan society, we are peculiar, or we have our own sets of characteristics. But one of our characteristics is that we love to participate in things together. It's a highly participatory society, and we love to come together to build greater things. And a good example is these human towers. I don't know if you ever saw that before, but one of our favorite leisure activities, if you want, is to come together to build human towers. And the challenge here is that the tallest the tower and the less people you have in each level, the more challenging it is and the better it is. And we have competitions about that. So we love to do these kind of things. And this represents very well how we come together to solve problems and to stand on each other's shoulders. So we have a long and strong civil society tradition. And we come together not only to do these crazy figures, but also to solve problems. In fact, the volunteering movement is huge in Catalonia. 1 out of 10 people in Catalonia, it's permanently a volunteer. My mom goes 4 days a week to a hospital as a volunteer to help. And this is very, very big. And I see here is also big volunteering, and the organization of this event, I can imagine without the volunteers wouldn't be possible. So this is a great asset. And people volunteer in many areas, in social areas, community, international cooperation. For instance, here is an example of these clowns. I don't know if you have this here, but this is a group of volunteers that they go to hospital to cheer up kids that they are having, well, operations, or they're having some treatments. And this is all volunteer work. One good example of volunteering for social issues is the food bank. We have this foundation that was set up by civil society that basically organized a large network of volunteers to collect food to help the poorest people. Once a year, thousands of people volunteer for a weekend, and every single supermarket and market has a collection spot, and everyone brings food. They donate food for poor people. And only last year, over 16 million kilos of food were collected, and this way, and benefiting over 150,000 people. So this is only one example of volunteering for social issues. And of course, having the housing problem that I mentioned before, some sort of civil organization had to emerge around that. And it happened. A group of people came together saying, enough is enough. All these families being kicked out of the house for the benefit of the bank. That's not the way to go. Government is going way too slow in reforming laws. We need to do something. So basically, there is a group, there is the Loan Affected Platform in English, that will be Plataforma Afectados por la Hipoteca, PA. And this is a group of people that basically what they were doing is to go to houses the moment police was coming to kick people out, to avoid that they were kicked out of the house, and to stop the eviction. And they were highly effective. They stopped more evictions than any judge since 2008. So in fact, they stopped over 1,600 evictions. This is 1,600 families that remain in their houses. And it worked very well. Very controversial, very controversial. What is legal versus what is right, if you want. But it worked very well. In fact, the leader of that movement, the person that set up that program, and that has been the face of that movement, was recently selected as mayor of Barcelona. So our current mayor is not someone that has a political career or a political background. Is someone that comes from the civil movement. And this happened only 3 months ago. So we can imagine that at city level, many changes are going to happen just because of that. And it's this lady here. This is our mayor. This is a picture before she became a mayor, when she was the head of this movement. And she asked to stop evictions. That brings me to the second area where distributed models, this decentralized approach, it's having an impact, and that will be governance. In 2013, way before this lady became mayor, I had the chance to participate on a project of the city of Barcelona. The municipality realized that times were changing, that citizens more and more were asking to be involved in decision making. They wanted to have a responsibility also on how the city was run. And the municipality was sensing this, and they realized that it was a time to change approach from governing for the people to govern with the people. The million-dollar question was, how do we make this happen? What can we do about that? And we decided to do it through open innovation. The premise here is that citizens are co-responsible. They are in part responsible for some of the issues that the city is suffering, but they are also co-responsible to bring solutions to those problems. So what we need is platforms that allow citizens to participate in decision-making and development of these solutions. And the way that we decided initially to tackle that was through challenges, through competitions. And the first one that we launched in 2013, it was exactly about housing, because housing was such a hot topic and so controversial. So we launched a competition where we asked citizens to provide proposals, solutions, in order to stop evictions, to facilitate access to housing, to mobilize the housing market, because we had all these, the funny thing of the housing problem is that we have all these hundreds of thousands of empty houses. You have all these people that have no access to houses. What's happening here? And also we asked for innovative approaches or proposals for housing and urbanism. It was a test. We ran it for 3 months. We got 100 proposals, of which 10 of these proposals reached a maturity stage in which the municipality decided to put resources and support them in order to further develop them. And I would like to run you a little bit through how a process like this works. This is basically an online platform, an online activity, where we started posting innovative cases in order to inspire participants. And those were cases that came maybe from other countries, from other parts of the world, and that will set up the tone of the kind of solutions that we were looking. Then we opened the ideation process, and anyone could contribute with their ideas. This is very early stage, so we only ask for a description, a little paragraph. What is your idea about? No details here. And anyone could vote these ideas and receive support, and people could comment also and help improve those ideas. After this period, a selection was made based on the number of supports and also through a committee of experts from the municipality in different areas, in urbanism and economics and social services. 30 of these proposals were selected to go to the next phase, which is the concept phase. Here we combined the online activity with offline activities. So we organized workshops where the people that participated was meeting for first time with each other. They already spent a couple of months talking online, but now they met in person. We brought in experts from the municipality, so they could talk with an expert and say, well, that's feasible, that's not feasible. Here we have this, did you take into account that? And they developed further the proposal up to the point in which we were asking which kind of resources are needed, what is the finances of this proposal, what kind of social impact can we expect, what will be an implementation calendar. So here we're going to the detail. And finally, it was a second evaluation, second selection round, and we got the finalists. And these finalists received support from the municipality. In that case, there were 10 proposals to make it happen. So they will have direct access to technicians of the municipality and to resources of the city. We're having a bit of a conversation before, and maybe I bring this. This was the first time that it was done in Barcelona. And the city was somehow had mixed feelings, sweet and sour. In one hand, they knew they had to do it because people was asking for that. From the inside, I can tell you, there was so much fear about opening up. The people I was working in the municipality, they were all really afraid. What's going to happen when we open a channel and we let people talk specifically about a subject which is so controversial? Because this housing issue, it brings lots of desires. And it was such a civilized activity, I have to say. The municipality was afraid that they will receive all sorts of insults and so on, and not at all. People, they only wanted a channel to express ideas that they were already commenting between friends and groups. So sometimes you have to overcome that fear to go to the next level that opens many opportunities. In fact, this was an experiment in 2013, but I'm happy to say that out of that experiment, the city of Barcelona completely embraced the open government approach. Today, the city of Barcelona, it's an open government, which is based in 3 pillars: transparency, participation, and open data. All processes and decision making is made on a transparent way. Citizens can participate in decision making and proposals constantly, and all data related to the municipality is made available openly for anyone to take and analyze and use for their purposes. In fact, that experiment about the housing, now it's a permanent platform where at any time citizens can contribute with proposals to improve quality of life in the city. And not just in housing, but also in sports and economics, in urbanism, culture, as you see here. So we saw distributed models in civil society, in governance, how it's been affecting governance, and now we go to entrepreneurship. And I would like to talk about the social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Barcelona, which is, in theory, the main subject of this conversation. But before that, I would like to go a bit, have a higher perspective and talk in general about social entrepreneurship. I can imagine that many of you are familiar with the term, but it's always good to remind the basics. Social entrepreneurship is about developing business models that aim to improve social and environmental conditions. So it's about business models that aim to improve social and environmental conditions. It has 2 main components, 2 dimensions: the business dimension and the impact dimension. And I know that maybe it sounds a bit, yeah, why is he going so basic? I want really to point this because many times lately, we talk about social entrepreneurship, where in reality, one of the dimensions is missing. Maybe the business dimension is not there. We tend to talk about charity work. Lately, we also put the label of social entrepreneurship. It's very much needed, but it's charity. It's not social entrepreneurship. We need the business component, and we need the impact component. And I would like to argue a little bit of why it is that for the last 10 years or so, social entrepreneurship, it's really an issue. It's something out there in the agenda. I feel that these both dimensions suffer quite some evolution in the last 10 years that made possible that social entrepreneurship is very strong today. Let's start on the business dimension. Many things change in this area. Well, this is about how is value being created and captured. And the impact dimension is about how is the life of people being improved. So the business dimension, entrepreneurship. Until 10 years ago, entrepreneurship was some sort of magic. The person that was able to develop a successful business, it happened to be a gifted person that was at the right place at the right time. And there was some sort of black box there and some sort of magic. For the last 10 years, we learned that entrepreneurship is about well-defined processes and tools. And as such, entrepreneurship can be taught. It can be learned. That's a major paradigm shift from well, some sort of a loose thing to very well-defined processes and tools that can be learned and can be taught. That helps democratize entrepreneurship. The second change is that today it is cheap to fail. Because it was such an undefined process, to start a business venture, it was very risky and it was expensive to fail. But today we know that we have ways to early on validate business ideas and validate business assumptions, and in that case, it is cheap to fail. It's okay to try and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, nothing happens because you didn't risk that much. That's new. And finally, information and communication technology has enabled a new breed of business models that have two characteristics. They have a low entry barrier and a high potential to create impact and to create growth. What I mean is that it's only recently that two kids with a computer spending a weekend together, they can potentially set up a business that will have a huge impact. That's also new. We didn't have this 10 years ago. So entrepreneurship is living a golden era. It's been democratized and is living a golden era. But I argue that on the impact dimension side, also few things happened in the last years. We have a new way to look to the world. I will argue that anyone that is under 40 years old, it's been born in a globalized world and a clear understanding that what happens here has an impact at the other side of the world. We didn't know that before the 80s. In early 80s in England, people studying environmental issues, they were studying acid rain. Acid rain. The forest in England, they were affected by this rain that they had so many pollutants, and they were asking, where the hell is this coming from? And they learned that it was coming from industry in Germany. And it's in the 80s that we realized that environmental issues are transboundary. They don't know about borders. And then we start understanding that what you do here has an effect somewhere else. So the X, Y, and Z, and even the millennial generation, they have this embedded. They know that. And when you know that you live in a connected society, there is an obvious question that you ask to yourself. How am I contributing to make this a better place? What is my role in this connected society? So I will argue the following. Because of the evolution of the entrepreneurial dimension and because of the evolution of the impact dimension, that's the right conditions for social entrepreneurship to emerge and emerge very strong. Okay, I'm very short in time, so I'll go a bit, I'll skip some things. But maybe we can talk in the conversation later on. But when we talk about social entrepreneurship, one point to make clear is that not all social business are equal. You have a micro business, like one person developing some art crafts and trying to preserve some regional culture. That's a social entrepreneur. But also someone setting a multinational that's operating worldwide and it has big effects on socialists, that's also a social issue, a social enterprise. I'm pointing this because when aiming to provide support to social entrepreneurship, the level of ambition, the resources needed, and the kind of support needed is not the same for the micro business that for the small business and for the one that wants to go big. And we can elaborate later on, and I'm happy to share this, the presentation with you, and you can download it later on. So I'll go to the ecosystem. how can we support social entrepreneurship happen, or in general, entrepreneurship ecosystems. Entrepreneurship ecosystems have two main actors, the leaders and the feeders. I have disclaimer, this is not my work. This is the work of Brad Feld, which is the founder of Techstars, an accelerator in Boulder. But he defined very well that entrepreneurial ecosystems have the leaders, which are always entrepreneurs, and feeders is everyone else that is helping the entrepreneurs emerge and go up. So who are they and which roles they have? Entrepreneurs are always leading the community. You need to be the entrepreneur, the one that is the head of this movement. Then we have governments. What's the role of governments in entrepreneurship? The role should be to support what is in there, rather to create things from scratch. They should support the existing actors and the existing community, rather to try to set up something brand new from scratch without taking into account who is already working on the field. The role is also to provide a risk-free environment. So if you start a venture, you know what are the rules of the game, and those rules do not change in the middle of the game. And also that it's easy to get into that path. Then we have universities. The one in here, they play a huge role in entrepreneurial ecosystems. They are a source of talent. And talent, they are students, they are professors, they are researchers. But there is also a great place to, for instance, provide entrepreneurship programs to give support to the community, local community that they want to set up new ventures and to promote entrepreneurship internally, like it's happening here in PolyU. There is also, they play the role to go from the innovation happening, the developments happening in the labs of the university, bring them to the market. But they're also providers of a space. Many of the entrepreneurial activities happen many times in universities because a space like this that is available for meetings, for reunions, for acceleration programs. Then we have investors. Investors, they play the long-term approach. They are there for the long run, and they are supporting the community on the long run. They have lots of expertise, and they are great connectors. They are the ones that they connect people inside the ecosystem, and they do it in a very efficient manner. Then we have the mentors. Mentors is people that they have practical experience. They set up their own company. They've been there for many years, and they are willing to support entrepreneurs, and they do it for free. They do it because they want to give back to the community. Once, probably, someone helped them, so now that they are experienced, they want to give back to the community. Then we have service providers, consultants, lawyers, that they can help with many detailed tasks. And finally, we have corporations, large companies. Large companies also play a role in entrepreneurial ecosystems because they are the ones that they can enhance startups to connect with the company and provide the service to the company. But they can also provide resources and a space. They can promote programs and sponsor programs, and they are very much necessary. Take into account the time, I'll speed up. Maybe some examples of social entrepreneurs in Barcelona. So I would like to review 3 of these roles in Barcelona regarding social entrepreneurship. And examples of entrepreneurship that at the end of the day is what's inspiring. We have the case of Batek. This is Pau. This is a guy that he had a car accident and he was going on wheelchair and being frustrated because he couldn't find wheelchairs or solutions that they were fulfilling his needs. So he ended up developing an add-on. I had a video, but there's no time for that. The first part of this is a regular wheelchair. And actually, he developed this add-on that can be attached to almost any wheelchair on the market, and then it's electric. It's fantastic. He's selling worldwide. He has a company which is mainly composed by handicapped people, and they are producing in Barcelona and selling all over the world. You can go to batekmobility.com. And that's also interesting. Social entrepreneurship can have a technical dimension too. If we have industrial engineers, industrial designers here, that's industrial engineering and designing. And there is no video. Okay. Or Civic Club, it's a platform that gives rewards for good actions. Every time you give blood, you get points. Every time you volunteer, you get points. Every time you do a good action, you get points. And you can exchange these points for products and services of a catalog that they have. Their business model is a catalog business model. In fact, companies are paying to be part of that catalog and to put their products and services to the eyes of a very well-defined community. And it's working very well. Or Specialist Turn, this is a father that has an autistic kid, and his son is having difficulties to find a job because of his condition. And he realized that autistic people, they have a great eye for detail. They don't tolerate fault. They can concentrate for a very long period of time. And he thought, how can we use those skills for good, for work? And he realized, they are great for IT consultants. And he set up a company which he has hundreds of IT consultants, which they are all autistic people. I'll skip this. Maybe about funding, social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship is not different than regular entrepreneurship. So the path that entrepreneurs go to fund their venture is not that different. So in Spain, you will get first some pocket money from the founders. People is putting maybe 30,000 Hong Kong dollars on the team to start. But then you will apply for some public funds, either loans or subsidies. Yeah, in 5 minutes we are done, for sure. Then the next step is that people will go to banks to ask for loans. Then we'll go to the business angel estate. Business angels in Spain are far from the level of business angels in the US. So a regular ticket for a business angels will be 250,000 to $500,000 Hong Kong dollars. That's low for American standards. And then you will go to venture capital, to capital risk and investors. The largest impact investment fund in Spain is 500 million Hong Kong dollar. And in general, VC funds in Spain, they are much smaller than in the US. The largest investment fund overall, which is in biotech, is 1 billion Hong Kong dollars. But what we see, once again, distributed models, crowdfunding is coming very, very hard, especially equity-based crowdfunding. So people participating on the startups and getting equity, getting some of the ownership. About incubation programs, regarding social entrepreneurship, we have several. And what you will see is that typically there is a business school coming together with a bank in order to support social entrepreneurship. And they are, it depends on the program, but some programs go from very early stage, and some programs they ask that the startup has already been running for 2 years and they have sales. And they will provide mentorship, they will provide resources, and they provide funding also. I would love to spend another session only about incubation programs, because that's what I drink and breathe every day. And there are different models of incubation programs, and incubation has suffered also an evolution, and that's an interesting discussion. But you will have the traditional model, typically publicly funded, which goal is to multiply the number of ventures in the region versus the new models that will be more commercially oriented, and which the model is to make startups sellable. They are investment ready. So to conclude, what seems to work, what needs to be improved, and then final words. The impact dimension is on the agenda. It's been already for at least 10 years. This is good. Both in Catalonia and in Spain and in Barcelona, the ingredients for the ecosystem are there. We have the entrepreneurs, we have investors, we have the acceleration programs, and we have the government support. And what we see is that social entrepreneurship is maturing very fast. And we have models that can be replicated. That's very important in entrepreneurship, to find models that can be easily replicated. And collaborative consumption, that we don't have time to talk, is one of these approaches that can be highly replicable. What should we improve? Well, we always need more examples of successful startups. We have quite some, but we always want more and more, and we are looking for the next, who is the next unicorn. Also, although it's been 10 plus years that we're in social entrepreneurship, it's still a field that needs to mature, and it needs to fine-tune, and it requires some experimentation, and that's what we are doing. We are risking and we're experimenting to see what works and what doesn't work. And also, I would like to say that we need to improve this idea that sometimes we call social entrepreneurship, but in fact is charity. Social entrepreneurship means that there is a business model behind. We need that business model. So this misconception needs to be clarified. Final words. Social innovation is mainly happening bottom-up. It's emerging from the basis. Distributed models are now widely adopted in many areas. Expect a future where everything is distributed. Social entrepreneurship is not different than regular entrepreneurship. You need the same resources, the same effort, and the same risk. And the conditions are right for social entrepreneurship to evolve and consolidate and become a very mature field, both in Barcelona and also in places like Hong Kong. So, till here the presentation. I don't know if it is time for questions, or maybe during the discussion we will do that. We'll do through the panel. So, thank you very much. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Oriol, for a very wonderful discussion. I think speaking for myself, I certainly, it gave me a lot of food for thought, and a lot of it relates to, I think the one thing that really struck me was the decision by the Barcelona government to open up everything to its citizens, right? This is something that I think Hong Kong, if we're able to somehow emulate that, I think it will really change how civil society works together with the government. But that's something that I would love to hear your thoughts as well. And like I said earlier, given the relatively small group that we have and that everyone has a mic in front, we really want to make this interactive. But before we open up the questions to the floor, I wanted to give Kim an opportunity to respond, 5 to 10 minutes in terms of what your thoughts are. And I think it might also be worthwhile to share a little bit of what the programs that you run for the benefit of some of the people in the audience that may not be as familiar.
I'll try and keep it closer to 5 minutes. The thing that really struck me about the presentation, I saw the slides a bit in advance, were the figures about the social challenges that were put up. Now, Hong Kong, we don't face the unemployment problem that they have in Spain. Our housing problem is severe, but it's a very different character from Spain. But look at the figures on the elderly. At the moment, Hong Kong has slightly less elderly over 65 as a proportion than Barcelona. By 2050, Barcelona will only have 30% of its population over the age of 65. Hong Kong, that'll be 36%, of which the proportion of those over the age of 80, which are the ones who really put the burden, not just on the healthcare system, but on your families as well. And I just look around my office and I see how many people there are having already to carry the burden of aged and infirm parents, and how much more of a burden that's going to be for the city as a whole. So for me, if you like, that's the big challenge. How do we re-engineer, not just in a physical sense, but in a social sense, the way the city works, so that it continues to be a place that gives a decent home to elderly people, giving them the opportunity with their better education and better health to continue to contribute back to society, but also to support the young people and ensure that they have got a career and opportunity that is a lot more flexible. And my work is very much from the public service itself. And I see at the moment, less than 20% of all public servants, not just the narrow civil service, but also the huge amount of subvented agencies as well, less than 20% of them are engaged in elderly services and healthcare for the elderly. Right? 25 years' time, that will need to be at least 40%, which means all the other services are going to have to be done with far less resource than they are at the moment. That's not going to be possible without a transformation in the way that government itself operates. And here, again, the new technology that's coming in is the huge area of opportunity. That the distributed models that we talked about, this is the way that both the networks of family and society to support the changed population will come, but also for government itself. Here is the opportunity we're going to have to make use of to continue to provide that framework of decent laws, decent rules that enable individuals, businesses to operate effectively without risk. But if we continue to do it through very siloed sort of top-down, this is the thing and this is how it must work, there are going to be increasing problems because, again, the other side of social innovation is it demands significant changes in public service in the way that we regulate and manage things. So we're going to have to embrace that opening up as well in order to be able to cope with that. And the work of my unit is trying to think how that might happen. And it's been great fun over the last couple of years to be working with the Social Innovation Fund to think how can we be starting to create that support for the ecosystem of social innovators, but also use that to say to government departments, hey, you don't need to necessarily do this yourself anymore. You can hand things over to the community. They're capable of coming up with ideas if you provide the structure. And I think that the idea of the challenge that focuses people, that here's something that you really need to work on, something that we should pursue further. In a way, the Commission on Poverty was an attempt at how do you get collective impact around an issue. But poverty is, we found there's so much to it. We need to start breaking it down. And what we've now trying to do with the fund, after having set up the 4 intermediaries to sort of help fund sort of the incubation and startup, is how can we create groups around a particular problem, early childhood education, particular areas of elderly service, and bring together banks, innovators, and government departments to think how can we bring together all the different things that volunteers and others are doing in these areas at the moment and make sure that we're getting the data that we can see the impact and therefore learn from it and see how we can do it better in future, but also give a challenge here in this area. We need over the next 15 years to make X improvements. Who's got ideas for doing that? I think that kind of thing will be an increasing part of the work we do in the years ahead. So lots of stuff to learn. But I'd say also it's interested me looking at Barcelona and thinking, yes, they've made a very good presentation of what they've done around open government. There's been a very coherent directive. But when you start looking around in Hong Kong, there's actually lots of things happening. one of the difficulties is people don't necessarily know about it and don't connect with each other. I think that role of government of being the connector of academia, business, social enterprise, to come together to see actually, we're actually working in the same areas. How could we work together more effectively is something that needs to be done more of, and the SIE Fund will, again, have that as part of its work going ahead. Thank you.
In the interest of opening up to the group, I would rather that we hear more from you've been listening to Oreo for over an hour. Is there anyone out there, before I start calling on you, who would like to share some responses? And please introduce yourself, and please limit your responses to perhaps a minute. I'd like to hear from 2 or 3 people before we move on to the next set of questions. Yes?
I have been doing voluntary work in Hong Kong and also overseas in Cambodia. And when I look at how the society mobilized the people to solve the social issue or deal with the social issue, I'm concerned not only making resources, I'm concerned how people, we think of the service, the meaning of the service, how we care the people. When we think making resources to do the service in Hong Kong, we have many resources, but I discover those professional workers, they can't really recreate the service meaningfully. They just make up data, or the workers not really taking professional role. I think I appreciate the movement. I want to hear more about how the new thing back up the people to care the people deeply, I mean, more professionally, not only solving the problem.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from a few more people, and then we can respond as a group. But I would actually, at this stage, I would like to hear from people in response to your own experience, what Oriel described. I mean, how does it resonate with you? Let's focus on that part first, and then we could go through a set of questions that would address different themes. Anyone else want to share?
This almost sounds utopian to me. I'm deeply impressed, but at the same time kind of saddened on the emotional level. I don't know if I really resonate as a local person in Hong Kong. When I listen to what you presented about what happens in Barcelona and what is happening in Hong Kong, it does sound utopian to me. And I'm interested in knowing what kind of political and social climate that made it possible. And I believe it can be possible. And I really appreciate the university of putting together all these seminar and impactful speakers to really make us think. And we do want to see it happen in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Anyone else like to share your thoughts on this particular thing, follow up on that, or any other issues you want to bring up?
I think what struck me is what Oriel mentioned, fear, and also experiment. It's something that I'm not sure whether our culture or the current climate allows or we give ourselves permission to do that. And I don't know whether there's anything we can actually do. Is there anything from the ecosystem, from the feeder that can do to help?
Kim? I'm sorry, you're the government representative, so we may ask you to respond a little bit. Is that what Barcelona has done? Can we do this in Hong Kong in our lifetime?
Well, I do think these issues of fear and self-censorship, they're common everywhere, but different societies are better at coping with them. And from my perspective in government, I've seen lots of opportunities opened up for participation. I remember, 15 years ago now, when I was working in the environment, I issued an open invitation to people to come and join groups to contribute ideas about how environmental improvement would take place. Lots of people came along and just sat there, not saying anything, because they didn't trust that if they shared the idea, something would happen, They were worried, perhaps, that I would say, oh, no, no, that's a bad idea, we'd do something else. And creating environments in which people feel free to talk and to share an idea, even if it's a bit crazy, or even if they think it's a bit crazy, but it can then be taken up and shared around. I think one of the things I feel I've learned over my experience is you've got to get away from, oh, openness, you should just do it because it's a good thing. Actually, openness, if it's to work well and not to be captured either by the expert who thinks they know everything anyway, or the person who's got an agenda they want to push and they're going to try and capture it, you've got to design the process very carefully. And you've got to put in quite a lot of effort and time to work with it. I must say, from an efficiency point of view, I am now making myself very unpopular by saying one of the biggest damages to the efficiency of public processes in Hong Kong that we have done through the public sector reform program over the last 30 years is to strip out the capacity and the time for people like me to come and join in discussions like this, and to create space in which people feel we've got time to talk and you'll be listened to. We're all so busy. We've got our task, efficiency, I've got to get this done by sun, I don't have time to talk to you. This can get used as an excuse, but also it is a reality for most civil servants. Their job, they've got certain things they must get done within certain times, and it doesn't give them the time to engage with the community in the way that I think if you're going to have successful public processes, you actually need to allow inefficient time for discourse, because without that discourse, you don't get to the big ideas. You just get lots of little incremental improvements which don't really attack the root causes of problems.
Oriol had mentioned earlier in his presentation that the millennials, and in Hong Kong we refer to them, people who were born after in the 80s or 90s, have a more global view, right? Is there any millennial out there or people in their 20s or 30s that would like to share your view? Do you agree with what Oriol is saying? What is your sense of what's happening in Hong Kong and how would you like to see things different?
Hi, my name is Mandy. I think my perspective is that I really, really love the role that IT and the platform and having a platform and seeing the impact that having a technology platform allows voices from the community and also connect different government officials. And I guess just right in response to what Kim was saying about having spaces for people to really open up. I mean, for us or for people who grew up with having that connectedness, Facebook just pledged with one to connect pretty much to connect the people in the world who are currently not connected for the purpose of being able to share and also have eyes on the community. So my question is, what is the Hong Kong government or what is the efficiency unit doing, or maybe other efforts in the community doing to create that platform? And I know that there have been existing initiatives, so it would be great to hear what is happening. I mean, we always hear that the government is doing a lot, but it just seems so difficult to know. So yeah, it would be great to hear about that.
I have a question for Oriol, actually.
Okay, sure.
Now, but it has to do with governance. Two questions. Number one is about education, and number two about legislation. First of all, education. I would like to know that, because you're also from a university, and of course this is also a public university, and I think the university held a lot of responsibilities in this transformation towards a, let's say, more contemporary, bottom-up kind of a society, because we are part of the old game. In fact, if you look at how we train our young people, all the departments, our developmental culture is worse than the government. When we talk about, we have social workers who do not understand business, therefore they're not good operators for social enterprises. Or when we talk about professionals like engineers who has no knowledge about anything about the society, it's the university fault. So first of all, like I confess that we have a lot of room to improve. Now, but in Barcelona, what has the university done to deal with all these changes? That's number one. Number two, legislation. Now, Oriel, you already mentioned that perhaps one of the core role of the government is to set the rules, draw a line, right? It doesn't have to like run programs or stuff like that. Come on. Now, in other places, even in this region, like Korea, they're a lot more aggressive in, for example, setting up a list, so to tell that who are actually the social enterprises, for instance. Of course, there are implications like tax kind of exemption or reductions and so forth. So is there anything that the Barcelona or Catalonia government has done to define who are social enterprises, therefore giving what you might call essential help for them, for instance, on tax or other things that is within the kind of government control?
Okay. Well, to the first question about the professionalization of social work, well, I mentioned all the work that is done by the volunteering and civil society, but definitely we have a very strong social worker group. And one thing is not exclusive from the other. And I will say that social workers are very much engaged on their work, and they love what they do, and they get supported by volunteers. I put the example of my mother. My mother, she goes 4 days a week to this hospital because she retired, and then 4 days a week she's volunteering in the hospital, and she works hand by hand with the people that it's employees of the hospital. And they all rely on each other, and the people that is employees of the hospital, they have a set of competences that my mother will never have, but my mother can do things that the professionals cannot do. And this is complementary. So they are working well together. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but if your point was about, well, volunteers are well, but what happens with the social workers? They're working well, it's strong. Maybe we wish to have more investment be made in the social workforce, but so far is working well. Then we have the comment from the lady about the utopian approach and how is that possible. And it had to do with the open government. It's also true that this is a presentation, and I'm presenting the highlights here. This is a process. This is a process that is a long process. And even for myself that I was involved in this process, it was very surprising to realize that one day our local government say, like, we need to do something about that. And again, as Kim mentioned before, things have to be very well designed. Openness per se is not good, or it cannot be taken as is good by definition. And that's why they started by having an experiment and starting very low key. We started with this program about the housing issue. It wasn't put under the spotlight. It wasn't on the big highlights. Let's just experiment. Let's see how this works, and let's get some learned lessons out of that. So what I'm saying here, it's a process. It takes lots of experimentation. You should be willing to make mistakes. That's why you do that. But once the decision is made that there are other ways to work and to complement, that's also to realize that one thing is not substituting the other. This is complementary. This is helping to reach to areas that maybe you could not reach before. But yeah, it did work. It did work, and it worked well. And once again, this fear, sometimes we feel that people is full of anger, maybe, but people is highly responsible at the end of the day. When you put tools like this in the hands of people, people feel the responsibility. And that's what we learn out of that example. But once again, experimentation is important. Start small. that if you fail, not big damage is made, and then learn from there and grow. Yeah, and then we had your questions about the education. What are universities dealing with these changes? I feel you when you, and I think we're in the same point, basically. I have lots of faith on the educational system. I love education, but I think we are lagging behind. This is an area, as we've been innovating in other areas, in this area we are so much lagging behind. You explained me before the presentation how GCDC is taking this project-based approach and having multidisciplinary teams working together and so on. That's what we need more of. That's the future of education, but that's not happening in Spanish universities at all. In fact, it's only happening not at all in public universities. It's only happening in private universities and private business schools, where they may have programs on design thinking, if you want, and innovation, and they do programs that are multidisciplinary and project-based. So companies will come with challenges to solve an issue, and they will put engineers and social people together and business people together to solve this problem. And that's the future of education, 100% for it. That's not happening in Barcelona. It's happening at very low, small scale. And about the legislation, the local government has programs to promote social entrepreneurship, but that is through support, but there is, as per now, any tax exemption if you have a social business, if it is set up as a company, if it's an incorporated. If you set up as a cooperative, as a foundation, then you will have some tax benefits, but not if you are a regular company. And what we want is that social businesses are incorporated as a regular company.
Is there kind of a social enterprise ordinance or anything like that that has gone through the local government?
The local government launched 4 years ago a program on social entrepreneurship. And basically, there are different elements there, but it's to put the spotlight. They built a platform, they organize events, they give awards, there is a directory of the social enterprises. It's about promoting the movement as a whole, rather than practically put resources or do some tax exemption. But it's about recognizing that it's there, recognizing that it's important, and putting the spotlight.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to, we have about 15 minutes, but I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on one of the slides that you had on funding. Right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's wonderful if you have all the right ingredients, but as you know, in this day and age, without money, things move very, very slowly. You mentioned that the government had selected 10 projects, right? And offered them some sum of money. Are you able to share how much money was involved there?
No, well, this was about the housing project. This was the municipality of Barcelona rather than the government, and the resources. This support was provided in resources, so it was in hours of technical people from the municipality in giving a space available for these projects to develop and to set up their own projects there. But it was not in cash. In fact, as a first attempt of supporting this kind of programs, it was made clear that it would be very controversial for the municipality to give money to specific projects, because lots of issues will be like, why money this and not money to that, since when the municipality gives money, there are very clear procedures on how to do that, and this was out of the procedures.
Got it. I wanted to share, I mean, some of you may be aware of these statistics, right? But last night I looked up a little bit. It's like, does the amount of the wealth of a country have anything to do with its ability to innovate? The US has foreign reserves of about 120 billion. The UK has 150 billion, right? Obviously, they have much larger populations. Hong Kong's foreign reserves is more than the UK and the US combined at 330 billion US dollars, right? And we only have a population of 7 million people compared to 300 million in the US and some 80 million in the UK, right? So what are we missing? So obviously money is not the magic ingredient, right? But on that point, we have a representative from the Jockey Club, obviously one of the biggest funders of public sector activity, particularly on the charitable side, Ryan. Ryan, not to put you on the spot, but are you able to perhaps share with us a little bit what the Jockey Club's thinking is in terms of promoting, social innovation and perhaps investing more in the human elements of the society rather than historically what you've been doing in terms of donating buildings, football stadiums, golf courses, and so on?
I ran into Kim, I guess, a month ago. Not exactly running into. We were both at a Make a Difference event, which is, I guess, similar to this in so many ways. But it was a social innovation lab program thing, and it was the end of the project, and two project teams presented the work around Sham Shui Po and poverty alleviation, their ideas, and I think one was about homeless. Anyway, so it was well attended a Saturday afternoon, and a lot of the participants in the audience actually shared their point of view, and they talked about all kinds of things that they like to do and have started doing on their own. And many of them asked, where could we get funding? And my response then was, it's actually not the lack of funding that matters. There are, not just the Jockey Club Charities Trust, but also a lot of private foundations out there and, Social Innovation Fund, as well as other private incubation activities going on in Hong Kong. So if you ask the people who are holding these pots of money, the one thing that they will tell you is money is not an issue. It's about having the good idea and the right people. Now, part of it, I want to go back to what Ada said, in fact. And in fact, what Oreo said as well. It's about creating the environment where the cost of failure is low. Now, I don't know, and that's only my personal point of view. The perceived cost of failure in Hong Kong is still rather high. Part of it could be culture, that, we don't like to fail, and we just don't have that failure as a badge of honor culture here yet. Part of it is perhaps real, the opportunity cost of not getting a regular job is quite high in Hong Kong. You have to be able to make ends meet and support yourself, your family, get married, buy a flat, so on and so forth. So, and these are all real, right? If you tell your parents, I'm going to start a business, the first thing they ask you, so how do you support yourself, right? So I think that's the one thing that we're trying to collectively work on, with the DC team here, with Make a Difference School and other operators in Hong Kong.
Do you think the Jockey Club could do more? I don't want to be the one making all the inquisitions.
Meanwhile, people is thinking about it, but it's very similar to our case in Spain. We are not the US. People is risk adverse in general in Spain, and it's not easy. It's not easy, but more and more it's becoming normalized, and more people it's learning. That's why I was saying before that I think that's a paradigm shift in entrepreneurship. It's been democratized, and people stand to understand. So I see little by little changing, but I don't know what the level of shame there is there, but people is very afraid to be pointed with the finger that you fail. But that's changing, definitely changing. Yeah.
Hi, I guess I'd like to build on that and also kind of repeat my question because it seems like we have the money. We have actually quite a lot of community initiatives. I think that Hong Kong people are actually, as a whole, quite educated, and there are there's a lot of grassroots initiatives. But it seems like connectedness is still kind of part of with a question mark. So I would love to have an answer to my earlier question as to what the government is doing. I know that you are doing stuff, and why is it so difficult to find out? Thank you.
Addressing the question of why it's difficult to find out, I mean, at the moment, the structure of government is very much more fragmented than elsewhere. That we've created lots, over the last 30 years, we've broken up departments for the purpose of specialisation to get more efficiency out of narrow areas, also for corruption prevention. And that was a very strong thing, to break up big conglomerates where things could get hidden into narrow things. What we've seen from that, and other countries who've done the same thing, New Zealand, for example, have found, yes, this produces very much better immigration services, or very much better land registration services, or companies registration, but makes it very much more difficult for you to join things up and see, not just if you're a citizen, what government is doing, but also within government, who's doing what, and how do you coordinate around a complex problem. So changing the patterns of government is one of the things we're looking at, because within the efficiency unit, we've been doing quite a lot of experiment around, well, how are young people using all the new media to connect with each other? How do you make public sector information and services interesting and available and relevant to young people in the new platforms that they're using? Because they won't generally want to come into boring government offices or use what they see as boring and not very well connected government websites. And if you contrast Hong Kong, say, with what the UK has done around its digital government. In Hong Kong, you've got GovHK, which is a very good interface laid over the top of all the little silos. So each department, each unit has still got its own little website under that. So what GovHK is simply a showcase for all those little things. Whereas in UK, GovDirect is the digital representation of government to the community. And services are increasingly seamless. You come into one point, you can work directly through. Here, things get chopped off. So we're working with OGCIO. How do you make, if you start a transaction, you can complete it electronically? We're trying to share the learning we've had from Youth Portal with other departments around the design of how do you interact with young people. We've run a lot of seminars trying to raise the awareness. Because what my unit is an innovation unit where we can test out and try things. If it works, we then share it with other departments. But I have to say, from my point of view, it's actually very frustrating and very inefficient having to share it with everyone and see, well, different departments will take it up in different ways.
Right.
So trying to create a structure where there is some central direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. I guess my what I was asking in terms of connection was referring back to the platform that Barcelona had in terms of having, first of all, creating the inspirations around like social problems that we have seen around the world. Just having that, and I guess my idea of communication is not so much within. I mean, definitely appreciate that insight, and really, I think is important for us to understand where the government is at in terms of the split in departments. But also, when we're talking about social progress or even environmental progress, and kind of in terms of using the Jockey Club's funds or even other funds from around the country, how are we able to prioritize what are the problems in the communities? Like, what I was thinking of in terms of communication was, can we have a platform from the government to, first of all, showcase the successes and the failures that have happened around the world so that we tackle head-on the kind of culture around the fear of failure, and that is kind of spearheaded by, I guess, from the community and the government, but the government's role is really to build that infrastructure so that the community can speak up and share their experiences, and we begin building that culture. And then from there, the platform of connecting the ideas, entrepreneurs, universities, like that is the infrastructure I was talking about, not so much within the government, which we appreciate the insight, but also just connecting the community as a whole so that we can, I guess, also delegate the tasks that the government has taken on separately, it seems.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is that the Mandy wants an opportunity to have her voice as well as the voices of others in a youth community heard, rather than for the government to tell them, this is what services that we offer, which is a very top-down approach, right? So how can we get more civic participation? I think that's something that hopefully will get into your pot of ideas for you to consider as you think of different things different programs to run. But we have about 5 minutes. Alvin is waving his hand, but I want to offer someone else a chance to speak. Yes.
Hi, thanks for your sharing. My name's Amy Yan, a career coach. I believe career coaching could add a lot of value to social innovation, as if the social entrepreneur could gain greater clarity and know themselves better, then I believe it would help them to achieve their aspiration in a more sustainable and creative manner. So my question is, how do you think career coaching or career coach could fit in terms of different roles that you came up with, the slide that you had show us before?
Let's get a few more questions we can answer together.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Kenny. So I feel like in Hong Kong, the whole social enterprise scene is solely supported by the government and those NGOs like Jockey Club. And I feel that it makes people rely too much on this kind of compassion, and it makes this whole social enterprise thing more like an NGO instead of an enterprise. So I think impact investment is something that we have to do better in Hong Kong. But I have a question about the funding process. So in the funding process, do you think equity should be given out to the investors? Because sometimes the decision of this social enterprise may go against the interests of investors. Thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Do you think equity should be given out to investors during the investment process?
Equity, okay.
Yes, let's get two more and then we can answer them together. Yes?
Hello, my name is Jamie. It's not a question, it's some response to Ryan, because I was in the social lab in the MAP school on that day. And I also was one of the honor speakers, that's the presenter for the elderly group. So I really want to say something is that after social lab, we have some of us has continued to doing this thing. And I just want to show you a hope that young people today, they're really concerned about social innovation. And me, myself, are doing the gap year. So I am doing the internship in Good Lab and also want more experience, more knowledge, more skills to do the social innovation better. And but at this stage, I really want to respond to Ryan's that point, is that to find a good person, to find the right person to do the right things is really, really difficult and important. Because after commit more, I really realized that if you want this to be one career, it really have to take more effort, and maybe the hope lies. It's not just one lab, one workshop, one seminar. That we will find hope.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, my name is Elsie, and I have a question for Oreo, specifically about the process of the open innovation. Because in your slide, you shared that the first step is about inspiration. You share some cases and set some, like an example and standard. I wonder, in addition to that, do you go further in actually help them to define what is exactly the problem? Coming from a corporate innovation background, we've done some open innovation, and without this kind of steering, there are a lot of ideas all over the place, but actually not addressing the core issues, and hence there's problems of not enough good ideas, therefore no good funding available, etc. So I wonder if you can share more about that.
Sure.
All right, can we go 10 minutes over? Is that okay? All right, then we can go to, we have another 10
I
minutes.
think
Yes.
I should be the final one. To what extent does the failure or the dysfunction of the social and political system contribute to the rise of social innovation and entrepreneurship? Because you mentioned about the economic crisis and some political issue, negative social issues happening in Barcelona. So it contributes to the rise of social innovation. I'm thinking about the situation in Hong Kong. Perhaps you know the umbrella movement last year in Hong Kong. Some people think that is a negative movement, but perhaps we see the dynamics happening in the community. People, because they distrust the institution, because they distrust the large corporations, so they want to do something by their own. I want to hear your views about the social condition and this kind of dysfunction of the institutions at the role in this movement of social entrepreneurship.
We have quite a few.
Wow, very interesting ones. Yeah. Very interesting ones. First one was about career coaching and how can it help. I'm sure it can help. I think it's important when you have a client, someone coming to you, the fact that you are aware that there are these alternatives. I can imagine that someone that approach to career coaching is looking for opportunities and it's saying, well, I have these skills or these are the things that I want to do, which are the options that I have out there. And maybe you are not aware that there are new ways of doing business or there are new ways that you can use your skills like we saw here today. So I believe career coaching can help to guide people to do things that maybe they don't count. And that can be any of these roles that we told before. Maybe the investor always thinks in traditional models and should be aware that new things exist, or the entrepreneur themselves. So I'm sure it can help, it can contribute. I don't have experience myself on career coaching, so I'm not able to elaborate further on that. But I can imagine that it could be very valuable.
Sorry, let's take that offline. Yes, continue.
Okay. Then the second question is about equity. If you should give equity to investors, that will require a long answer probably.
30 seconds.
Yeah. Okay. It depends in which stage you are, and I believe that it's someone that is trusting on you, someone that is not an institution, but someone that is trusting on you and is putting money, you should give something back to this person. And I'm sure that if it's early on the stages, they are not doing it in order to become rich. They are doing it in order to help you. But it's always good to show an appreciation and that you are playing the game as the rules are defined. So if that's a private investor, even if it's like a family relative that says, look, here you have 50,000 Hong Kong dollars, it's good that you're playing by the rules of the game because you will find yourself later in the process that you have to do that. So you have to learn how this works. If that's an investor, if it's someone really putting money from a private perspective. Then it was the question about defining the problem. How do you define the problem? Well, I didn't explain, but we did quite some work on defining the housing problem. So in fact, the website had a huge section about when we talk about housing issues, what do we mean? And we had defined who are the actors, what are the numbers, what are the consequences, how big is from a social perspective, how many people it's affected. So actually in documentation, we had like a big report, but it was put on the website very nicely about the problem and defining the problem. Because what we learned very early on is that what for me is a housing issue is something else, it means something else for someone else. So definitely very important. And the last one was about to what extent the failure of politics has led to that movement. I think it definitely plays a role. But it's the combination of, in general, our society being very participatory already for generations, together with the fact that the current political environment invites for this to happen. And I end with that sentence, but I believe if it's not that if you don't live in a Scandinavian country or in Switzerland, people all over the world is asking for more democracy and more involvement and participation. Doesn't matter where you are. And everyone has a way to demonstrate it. You had it here last year with the Occupy Central. We had it a few years ago with similar movements. It's happening all over the place. So it definitely plays a role.
Kim, any last comments for wrap up today?
On the politics, again, I'd echo, yes, it does have a role, but social innovation and social entrepreneurship have been around in Hong Kong, and I'm sure in Barcelona, for long before the immediate political issues. They arise, and the need for them increases as major changes take place in society, whether from aging or, I think, the liberating effect of technology and the sort of transforming patterns of business and of government and of the way that individuals can connect. I mean, the fascinating thing is, on the internet, you can be part of a community that is not in a place. It's spread around. And again, the ramifications of that for the way that governments and cities and organisations work are going to be enormous. And the experimentation that's needed to enable us to learn together how to continue to live together well in this kind of transformed world is enormous. And that really, for me, is that the value of the social innovation approach, because it is making those experiments from which we can learn together. I'll respond to you later on the specific things we're doing around innovation. Just simply to say, on the youth portal, most of the content on that now is created by young people. Indeed, the design of it, we got in people from universities and schools to help with the design, and that's an iterative process. So opening up platforms so that they're not just government putting out information, but become places of discourse. Yeah, there's a lot further to go on that, but we are working on it.
I just want to take a few minutes to share some of my thoughts and more my hope, and then I'll give Alvin the last word. The way I look at it, right, there's a number of very important themes and issues that have been raised, right? In these discussions like this, it's always that just as things are getting interesting, we're running out of time, right? But we will be here, and you're welcome to come up here and talk to us. And obviously, we can continue the discussion online and email and so on. But one hope that I have, right, having been in this field for the last 6 years, right? What I really feel bad about when I tell people is how little we actually have achieved in this last 6 years, given the vast number of financial resources that's available to us as a city, the intellectual capital that is in the city, right? I don't know what is missing, right? Is it this? I can only sum it up as there's this mental block, right? And this mental block sits in everyone, whether it is certain parts of the government or people advising the government, large nonprofits in universities and so on, right? If I have one hope, right, it's for people to start thinking that, hey, we are doing this for the betterment of the city, not for the betterment of ourselves, right? This is not about making money for yourself, making yourself famous or what, right? But if you can put that aside for a moment and collaborate and work together and listen to what people are doing, I think that will make a huge difference. And the last thing I really want to say is that, you know, innovation is about change, taking risk, right? And you cannot, as government entities or large funders like Jockey Club, you cannot keep funding the large universities and the long-established NGOs. You have to take chances with the startups, right? Because those are where the ideas are, right? If you're not even going to listen to them and give them the opportunity to, and frankly speaking, in the context of $4 billion that you're spending, the Jockey Club spent last year, this is a drop in the ocean. Just set aside a tiny little fund, which is less than 1% of that. 0.1% of 4 billion Hong Kong dollars is 40 million Hong Kong dollars, and that's a lot you can achieve, right? Surely, that's rounding error, right? So surely we can do that, right? But anyway, enough of my hopes. But I want to thank the Poly for giving us an opportunity to dialogue this morning. And Alvin, as I promised, you can have the last word.
Just want to have to continue your emotional kind of advocacy. And also, I would like to just, with a number of good people here, to share my feeling. I think there's one piece missing, which is, indeed is core to the success of social innovation at the end of the day, is the value, is trust. And it's the same thing that you talk about, like, that we need to listen to each other and believe in each other. And I think that's the most important part of it. I do think that really the picture that struck me at Orio's presentation is that human tower, actually. And when I look at that, and I just feel like, when was the last time that Hong Kong people actually worked together to construct? Even, and of course we could see some good sign, what Jessica just mentioned, the occupying site last year. I was entirely almost indifferent. I'm not interested in the political claims during that time, but the positive thing about that site and the people there is that there's some interesting collaboration going on, and that's the very rare occasion that you can see that in Hong Kong. I think Kim would know better than anyone, the government, but also other big institutions and even big companies. We spend, I don't know, half or more than half of our effort always on auditing and trying to check whether the other people are doing right or wrong or good or bad. Just believe in them and give all the resources to really do something.
Thank you so much, Alvin, for concluding, and thank you, our three speakers. It almost comes to the end of the seminar. May I invite all our guests and Alvin to take a group photo, please?